Unscripted by MJ DeMarco. Welcome to my channel. My name is Samuel and I want to make self-growth normal. If you want to make self-growth normal, because I don't want to do it alone, and who doesn't want to make self-growth normal, then make sure to smash that like button. Unscripted means to not follow a prepared script. And what is the prepared script? Throughout this book, the author violently tears through that and a lot of other things. I've never heard the sound of so many words smearing excrements of gold across the now overly painted canvas of made-up reality, namely in America. I've been asked about the differences between this book and his previous book, Millionaire Fastlane. So I'll be talking about this book throughout this review. I don't know why I wouldn't, it's a book review. I'm also going to be talking about the differences between them as well. And I'm also going to look at some of the top helpful negative Audible reviews and offer my perspective on them because sometimes, most of the time I disagree for the most part, but sometimes there are some valid points that they do bring up. The book has 5 parts. Part 1 is the dissonance. It's identifying the problem that's haunted you ever since you've been old enough to have a job. It's basically putting your foot in the pool. So throughout this book and Millionaire Fastlane, by the way, I'm gonna just take a big elephant in the room right now and just carve it out here, just get the carcass and feed all the meat to the snakes to the side right off the bat. I think it's very, very obvious how biased the author is against the status quo, but I think his passion for the consequences of the status quo presents itself in a very polarizing and, to me, it was quite accessible way. He really does preach against what most people think, kind of like a more intelligent Gary Vee. And not the sophisticated, thought-provoking Mark Manson type, but the type of a more revolutionary and less laid-back nature. Part 2 exposes the greatest con of the century and how it can steal your life. This part basically smashes that like button in case you haven't already for the YouTube algorithm and SEO and all this other stuff. And I also really appreciate it because so much work goes into making these videos. But no, this part takes your foot and it's like, okay bro, this isn't a pool, it's a rabbit hole. Get the f down here right now because you will not be able to unsee these things. I hope I'm not spending the bulk of this review talking about how explosive this book is in essence. What's more about it is that the author has successfully converted so many people toward his way of thinking because I think that there is a lot of leeway to do so. He's not picking some sort of extra political or religious platform to talk about here. I think it's really because despite the energy of his presentation, at least in the maybe first half of the book or so, according to the Frederick Dotson energy scale, as per the book Levels of Energy, it's an amazing book, my most viewed review of the last year. It's quite benevolent. In other words, he basically talks about all of this different stuff in a way that doesn't make it seem like this is all controlled by some small group of people who are being possessed by the devil. It's not like that. He does it more in a way where it's like we are kind of being programmed here regardless of anyone's intention, but it is a choice not to be programmed. Kind of like a red pill, blue pill thing. The first 2 parts really are drenched in rant material, so at least until this point, I was convinced that the book is a far more systemic breakdown of Millionaire Fastlane. If Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill had children, this one would definitely be the most rebellious and mischievous. Hyper-reality and stuff like that is not at all irrelevant to the book's topic. And it's also not at all something you would find in Millionaire Fastlane. He talks about the hyperbolized realities of, weekdays, consumerism, college degrees, corporations, virtual reality, hyper-personality, which is basically famous people and stuff like that, money, entertainment, and freedom. In other words, big giant illusions. It's a roller coaster because there is a lot of sincerity in many different points, but it isn't as obvious as the system shaming, which I don't entirely blame him for. At one point he says, marriage and children could be the most important part of your human experience. It's worth waiting until you can experience your true self, where you can give your kids and spouse everything you've got. Part 3 unveils the high definition vision of what's possible when your mind is free from the cultural doctrines that are kind of ruling the game. It's not like there's no truth to this stuff, but listening to the audiobook, for some reason, it just made me want to sit down and meditate. And I don't meditate anymore. Although understandingly. So, according to my psychiatrist and many spirit junkies on Instagram, I probably should. Part 4 reveals the doctrine to unscripted entrepreneurship. He'll tip this regarding the roller coaster thing. He'll tip the scale and say something like, the media has morphed from respectable journalists into a pathetic tribe of useful idiots, serving useless idiots, looking for the next hot headline scripted goulash, which I didn't know was a word, garnished in distraction and flavored for obedience. Journalism isn't dead, but undead? Do I disagree? I've done some research and I don't think I do. He also talks about the scams that scripted lives are prone to fall for. Shortcut scam, the special scam, the consumption scam, the money scam, the poverty scam, the lucky scam, the frugality scam, and the compound interest scam. In case you can't guess by the titles of these, let alone any others that I've given in the review so far, you almost wonder what he doesn't make fun of in this book, other than paying attention to and applying useful facts that are relevant to getting what you want. This book, it's much more abrasive. I found it funnier, actually. And part 4, I'd argue, part 4 is like the most important. This is the most gargantuan, unique part of the book. There's some serious info in Millionaire Fastlane. That book is a lot more focused on making money. I think this book isn't about saving money, but I think that the things you get out of it can seriously help you to save money if you have trouble understanding what the consequences of not saving money can do to you. So it's more indirect. Someone asked me which of DeMarco's 2 books here to check out first because they're just long. I mean, if you've checked out enough books about how and why to get rich, and you're looking for some fresh perspective and hard, super ridiculously, that's what she said, super hard advice to kind of further your journey, check this out first. You might not even need to check that one out after. Who knows? Part 4, again, it's just really just like, there really are no words. Like market feedback, leveraging, scaling, and magnitude for sure. Kinetic execution and planning, marketing and SEO. It's just like this brutal, like hammering frenzy of unconventional information. And lastly, part 5 reveals the greatest passive income system in existence where work becomes optional. This one's basically kind of like about investing. In part 5 and 4, there is just so much juice and beef, and I feel like this review is already long enough, but I wouldn't have that much to say about part 5 anyway after listening to part 4. I mean, it was just that one part. But part 5 does, I will say, have a lot of great advice on personal finance. What did the negative reviews have to say? Millionaire Fastlane, according to one-star review, is enough to get your system on the right track. What I see this one as, at least, is a great way to keep your system off of the wrong track. And I think that's important because knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do. As far as the differences in book contents, I recommend checking out my review of Millionaire Fastlane. This review said that Unscripted is a lot of filler. What not to do, in my opinion, is not filler. And if you check out the book the whole way through, this is a book where there's a ton of mindset and psychology talk, and then practical talk. All very, very interesting and entertaining talk, might I add. Like, I have no clue where MJ DeMarco got this writing style from, but bravo. Part 4, in my opinion, is worth so much more than how much the book costs. Part 5 is like an awesome bonus to it. But Unscripted and Millionaire Fastlane, they both have incredibly different concepts as well. If you don't think so, let's just say that it is a fact that they have the same concept. Just for the sake of argument. But is it still presented with the same way, in the same perspective? Hell no, it's not. No! Another review said that there's no statistics, which I kind of agree with. I did like the stories though. This book is quite observational. I don't think there's a lot wrong with that. I think he could have made it a little bit more obvious that this is probably going to be more of a focused book on observation than like statistics and studies. This guy seems like a smart dude. It doesn't seem like using a bunch of studies to get his points across is his intention. The book makes it seem like all corporations are bad. I disagree. I really heavily disagree. There's a brief scenario described in my favorite book ever, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, that upon the first listen, completely pivoted my feelings toward capitalism. And there's one part in this book, and this is just one example, that presents a very similar argument in a much more modern way, explaining the value in embracing and being grateful for large corporations and what they do. That does kind of sound ridiculous in theory, but I found it brilliant. And actually quite touching. I feel like I said a lot of different things in this review. I think the book's overall presentation had some speed bumps throughout the way. I would get this book and Millionaire Fastlane just to know more about what to do and what not to do. I would absolutely recommend this one just for part 4, however. It's absolutely disgusting. The last time I heard something like that was the last part of Built to Serve by Evan Carmichael. Honestly, because of part 4 alone, I like this book more than Millionaire Fastlane, just by default. I'll even go as far as to say that if he released just part 4 as the book, I still probably would have enjoyed it more. But regardless of whether the author agrees with this, I don't think that enjoyment of books can be scripted. And if he does, let's kind of just like keep it that way, okay? Quotes. You can be anything you set your mind to. The truth is, our children don't dream about mediocrity and uninspired living. The problem with the rat race is that even if you win, you're still a rat. If you don't have a sizable income, it doesn't matter how cheap you are. You can't squeeze a dime from a nickel. Money does sleep, but only when it's not properly employed. Autonomy is so influential, it could cause you to love life poor and hate it rich. The market is a fluid, dynamic body of information. It speaks often. When it does, listen. You don't know what you need to know until you know. Quit screwing with the olive and make a better martini. Direction 1. This is a very unique book because he talks about many important things, but he does it with this like anger that's very sly. It has this Nassim Taleb like tone of cynicism and sense of humor to it. But yet this, contrary to Nassim Taleb, you can actually kind of understand what he's saying. And by kind of, I mean like a lot. Granted, these concepts aren't that hard to understand in general, but they are really that important and too important to ignore in everyday life, in my opinion. I'm convinced, at least to the degree that most of us do. So I definitely recommend this book for anyone who is not getting anywhere in business and wants to know why. There, that's who I recommend this book for. If you don't know why you're not getting anywhere in business, if you're looking for, with all this money and time and energy that you probably wasted, where you went wrong, this book might just give you some hard clues as to where that was. Direction 2. If you like this book, oh my gosh, there's so many books to check out. I mean, like, the first ones that come to mind are The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb, and I suppose Millionaire Fastlane, also by MJ DeMarco, but the one book that this most reminded me of was, I feel like anyone who knows books like this is probably thinking the same thing, 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, legendary podcaster. Unscripted by MJ DeMarco. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. And I have been spending so much time on Instagram recently. My to be listened to list is like 100-something books now. I am basing it off of hype, which books I'm doing next. So if you have a book that you want me to review, annoy me a lot about reviewing it, but do it politely. And also let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my reviews, this far, and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to receive a notification every time I drop a new video, that will mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere and I will see you then.